stared out the lodge window at the raptors beyond the fence. They still seemed playful, making mock attacks at Ellie. The behaviour had continued for a long time now, and it occurred to him that it might be too long. It almost seemed as if they were trying to keep Ellie's attention in the same way that she was trying to keep theirs. The behaviour of the dinosaurs had always been a minor consideration for Wu, and rightly so. Behaviour was a second-order effect of DNA, like protein infolding. You could really predict behaviour, and you couldn't really predict behaviour, and you couldn't really control it, except in very crude ways, like making an animal dependent on a dietary substance by withholding an enzyme. But in general, behavioural effects were simply beyond the reach of understanding. You couldn't look at a DNA sequence and predict behaviour. It was impossible. And that made Wu's DNA work purely empirical. It was a matter of tinkering, the way a modern workman might repair an antique grandfather clock. You were dealing with something out of the past, something constructed of ancient materials and following ancient rules. You couldn't be certain why it worked as it did, and it had been repaired and modified many times already by forces of evolution over eons of time. So, like the workman who makes an adjustment and then sees if the clock runs any better, Wu would make an adjustment and then see if the animals behaved any better. And he only tried to correct gross behaviour, uncontrolled butting of the electrical fences or rubbing the skin raw on tree trunks. Those were the behaviours that sent him back to the drawing board. And the limits of his science had left him with a mysterious feeling about the dinosaurs in the park. He was never really sure at all, whether the behaviour of the animals was historically accurate or not. Were they behaving as they really had in the past? It was an open question, ultimately unanswerable. And though Wu would never admit it, the discovery that the dinosaurs were breeding represented a tremendous validation of his work. A breeding animal was demonstrably effective in a fundamental way. It implied that Wu had put all the pieces together correctly. He had recreated an animal millions of years old with such precision that the creature could even reproduce itself. But still, looking at the raptors outside, he was troubled by the persistence of their behaviour. Raptors were intelligent, and intelligent animals got bored quickly. Intelligent animals also formed plans, and Harding came out into the hallway from Malcolm's room. "Where's Ellie?" "Still outside." "Better get her in. The raptors have left the skylight." "When?" Wu said, moving to the door. "Just a moment ago," Harding said. Wu threw open the front door. "Ellie, inside now." She looked over at him, puzzled. "There's no problem. Everything's under control. Now." She shook her head. "I know what I'm doing," she said. "Now." Muldoon didn't like Wu standing there with the door open, and he was about to say so when he saw a shadow descend from above, and he realized at once what had happened. Wu was yanked bodily out the door, and Muldoon heard Ellie screaming. Muldoon got to the back door and looked out and saw that Wu was lying on his back, his body already torn open by the big claw, and the raptor was jerking its head, tugging at Wu's intestines, even though Wu was still alive, still feebly reaching up with his hands to push the big head away. He was being eaten while he was still alive. And then Ellie stopped screaming and started to run along the inside of the fence, and Muldoon slammed the door shut, dizzy with horror. It happened so fast. Harding said, "He jumped down from the roof?" Muldoon nodded. He went to the window and looked out, and he saw the 3 raptors outside the fence were now running away. But they weren't following Ellie. They were going back towards the visitor center. I'll just read a bit more. Grant came along to the edge of the maintenance building and peered forward in the fog. He could hear the snarls of the raptors, and they seemed to be coming closer. Now he could see their bodies running past him. They were going to the visitor center. He looked back at Gennaro. Gennaro shook his head. No. Grant leaned close and whispered in his ear, "No choice. We've got to turn on the computer." Grant sat out in the fog. After a moment, Gennaro followed. Ellie didn't stop to think. When the raptors dropped inside the fence to attack Wu, she just turned and ran as fast as she could toward the far end of the lodge. There was a space 15 feet wide between the fence and the lodge. She ran, not hearing the animals pursuing her, just hearing her own breath. She rounded the corner, saw a tree growing by the side of the building, and leapt, grabbing a branch swinging up. She didn't feel panic. She felt a kind of exhilaration as she kicked and saw her legs rise up in front of her face, and she hooked her legs over a branch farther up, tightened her gut, and pulled up quickly. She was already 12 feet off the ground, and the raptors still weren't following her, and she was beginning to feel pretty good when she saw the first animal at the base of the tree. Its mouth was bloody, and bits of stringy flesh hung from its jaws. She continued to go up fast, hand over hand, just reaching and going, and she could almost see the top of the building. She looked down again. The 2 raptors were climbing the tree. Now she was at the level of the rooftop. She could see the gravel only 4 feet away, and the glass pyramids of the skylight sticking up in the mist. There was a door on the roof. She could get inside. In a single heaving effort, she flung herself through the air and landed sprawling on the gravel. She scraped her face, but somehow the sensation was exhilarating, as if it were some kind of game she was playing, a game she intended to win. She ran for the door that led to the stairwell. Behind her, she could hear the raptors shaking the branches of the tree. They were still in the tree. She reached the door and twisted the knob. The door was locked. It took a moment for the meaning of that to cut through her euphoria. The door was locked. She was on the roof and she couldn't get down. The door was locked. She pounded on the door in frustration, and then she ran for the far side of the roof, hoping to see a way down, but there was only the green outline of the swimming pool blowing through the blowing mist. All around the pool was concrete decking, 10, 12 feet of concrete. Too much for her to jump across, no other trees to climb down, no stairs, no fire escape, nothing. Ellie turned back and saw the raptors jumping easily to the roof. She ran to the far end of the building, hoping there might be another door there, but there wasn't. The raptors came slowly toward her, stalking her, slipping silently among the glass pyramids. She looked down. The edge of the pool was 10 feet away, too far. The raptors were closer, starting to move apart, and illogically, she thought, Isn't this always the way? Some little mistake screws it all up. She still felt giddy, still felt exhilaration, and she somehow couldn't believe these animals were going to get her. She couldn't believe that now her life was going to end like this. It didn't seem possible. She was enveloped in a kind of protective cheerfulness. She just didn't believe it would happen. The raptors snarled. Ellie backed away, moving to the far end of the roof. She took a breath and then began to sprint towards the edge. As she raced towards the edge, she saw the swimming pool, and she knew it was too far away, but she thought, what the hell, and leapt into space and fell. And with a stinging shock, she felt herself enveloped in coldness. She was underwater. She had done it. She had come to the surface and looked up at the roof and saw the raptors looking down at her. And she knew that if she could do it, the raptors could do it too. She splashed in the water and thought, could raptors swim? But she was sure they could. They could probably swim like crocodiles. The raptors turned away from the edge of the roof, and then she heard Harding calling, Sattler. And she realized he had opened the roof door. The raptors were going toward him. Hurriedly, she climbed out of the pool and ran toward the lodge. Okay, that's enough for the time being, and I hope you enjoyed it. It's a great book. I always enjoy reading it. And yeah, like, share, subscribe, donate to GoFundMe if you care. So, thanks a lot. Cheers.